Our next presentation tonight, or really our first real presentation tonight, is by our associate professor and assistant chair of art and design, Chris Stagl, and a senior design student, Stuart Blake, who's a recent Addy Award winner, according to rumor. Yes. And it will be ethically leveraging artificial intelligence as a creative designer. Gentlemen.
Thank you. Thank you. You can relax.
That sounds good.
Thank you, everybody, for coming out tonight. Very special thank you to Dr. Noakes for inviting me to be a part of this. Alabama Humanities Alliance, my supervisor for affording me the opportunity to, be up on stage, and for Studio 207 to come out and film, and UAB, obviously, for their participation as well. So, my name's Chris Stagl. I'm associate professor of design here at Troy, assistant chair. And when Scott and I sat down to talk about this, really, it was kind of like yeah, you got this. Like, go get him, Tiger. And I was like, what the heck am I going to talk about? And I said, just off the cuff, everyone's talking about AI. Why not talk about AI? And he said, well, it's a popular arts conference, and AI is not necessarily the theme. He's like, but it certainly fits the bill. And I thought, okay, well, let's see what we can come up with, because I've been using it a little bit more and more lately, and obviously it's on everyone's mind. A lot of what I learned and what I'm going to share with you guys tonight is things that I've just experimented with throughout, my short tenure of teaching, art and design here at Troy. Primarily since a guy who couldn't be here tonight, who wanted to be here, a guy named Nikhil from AUM, Auburn, Montgomery, came down 2 years ago at our symposium, our Jerry Johnson Art and Design Symposium, and he talked about basically AI. And I'm going to just be 100% like, before his presentation, I was just steadfast in the mindset of, this is a joke. It's just all a joke. It's a dream, it's a fever dream. You're going to wake up one day, no one's going to give a crap about AI. It's going to go away, it's going to be like MySpace. It's just going to be gone, right? And, the more I read about it online, whether that was in interviews on LinkedIn, or the more I talked to Scott about it, the more I kept seeing it just kind of pop its head up into, popular arts, into the classroom. And then, of course, we start getting assignments here and there. I wouldn't say, it's been a huge influx, but I would say it's definitely on students' minds, to the point where, departmentally, candidly, we did craft a statement many, many months before the university did on our stance and how we felt about AI, and really, honest to goodness, just boiled down to one. It wasn't one sentence, but it really could have been boiled down to just one clear and concise sentence. Talk to your professor first, right? Because I can tell you right now that our chair, Greg Skaggs, is in the room. Greg Skaggs, everybody. And, well, that's a bit much, but okay. And I can tell you that Greg Skaggs is a big proponent of using AI as, a conceptual development tool. Coming up with some ideation, coming up with idea generations. But before I get too deep into how I use it, or how Greg uses it, or Will, or anyone else, I'm going to tell you a little bit about me. I'm going to tell you a little bit about this guy. I'm going to tell you a little bit about maybe where we see some things happening. And then overall, to be honest with you, like the presentation, I'm not going to talk for an hour. The presentation is really kind of like, yeah, we could have figured that stuff out without coming to this presentation. It's that kind of stuff, but that's the same thing I thought when I talked to Nikhil 2 years ago. Same kind of feeling that I had was, you know what, I probably could have figured all that out. But he stood in this very room, in this spot, and kind of talked to us about it. And I went, oh, this is actually real. This is real. This is actually really happening. And so I think there is an opportunity to have the open discourse and have the discussion and really talk about, you know, the shutter sound on a digital phone. It's just, it blows my mind, right? It's almost like this idea that I'd be walking around in here boing on my shoes as I walk, right? So, all right, so I'll just take you guys back a little bit. Not as far back as Scott was very openly talking about how we used to think the world was in black and white. Not that far back, right? But I'll take you back to good old 1991. And in 1991, I was knee-deep in transitioning an entire high school's journalism department from doing paste up on black and white, which basically meant we were running things that we had typed up through a glue machine, right? And we were transitioning over to a computer that had a piece of software on it called CorelDRAW. And we were using CorelDRAW and Aldus PageMaker to make multi-spreads, not unlike what Dr. Thrasher was talking about with how he registered for classes. So in 91, I was really introduced to my first big piece of design software, and that was CorelDRAW. And I went home, and I was just, my mind was blown, because what they did is they, very smartly so, they sent a magazine out to every high school in the country, and they said, this will work on your PC or on your Mac, and you open, and it was, I still have some of them. They're enormous, they're full color. To this day, I can open them up and they still boggle my mind how colorful they were. I can't even imagine how much they cost to print, because I know now it's just outrageous. But I convinced my dad to buy this for me, and it came in, no lie, like a 30 diskette set where you had to put in disc 1, disc 2. So fast forward from there, jumped into college, stayed with journalism, right? Started getting into a little program called, for our graphic design friends out there, Quark. And Quark, yeah, that's usually the experience, the expression we hear when we talk about Quark, the reaction. So Quark was kind of a predecessor to Adobe InDesign. And then obviously with the huge rise and stardom of Adobe, just kind of gobbling up all of these smaller corporations, transitioned over to doing that. However, and again, not to kind of date myself to everybody in the room, but in 1998, I was getting ready to graduate from undergrad, and I had no idea what I was doing with my life. I had worked for a photography company that took photos of sporting events around Jacksonville, Florida, and I was going to the University of North Florida. And I had a really wild teacher that taught me in a class called multimedia, and what he was teaching us to do was create interactive CD-ROMs. Now, Greg and I have discussed this before. For those of you that don't know, Stuart, a CD-ROM is a disc. And it's got a hole in the middle. When you place that disc in a computer, and it would become interactive. Not unlike a DVD, which you probably are thinking that I'm talking about, but I'm not, right? So an interactive CD-ROM, and it was authored with software called Director. And Macromedia made two pieces of software at the time. One was called Freehand, and the other one was called Director. And Director, it actually got kind of consumed up by Adobe later on for a very short lifespan before they killed it off, but it allowed you to author CDs. And I thought it was the future. Just like I thought CorelDRAW was the future. Just like when I was introduced to, full color magazines, I thought that was the future. And let's hope that that becomes the future again, and we can all just go back to that. But then I just slowly kind of sort of transitioned through learning 3D animation, learning video editing, and then ultimately going to grad school and coming out with all of these different things and not really knowing what to do and how to teach them or how to put them into place. And so I did what a lot of us in the room did. I went into education, and at the same time I was working professionally, building a portfolio. And you can go to chrisstagl.com and see some of that work, along with some of the incredible student work that I have up there. I won't bore you with showing you all of that today, but that's just a little kind of brief history about what I've been doing for like the past 30 years or so. And then last year, I met this guy, and this guy's name is Stuart Blake. And Stuart came along while we were in this room hosting a film festival, and he didn't know what he was walking into. He literally you had gone, you know what, I don't want to talk for you. Tell them a little bit about your past and how you got here, and then I'll interrupt you when you're boring us.
Yeah, so I started at Berry College in Rome, Georgia, and
Sure. You're doing great. Yeah.
and I started as a film major there, and so I didn't really have any previous knowledge of film or knew really what I was getting into, and I really didn't have a super creative mind, and so eventually after my first year there, I just kind of felt like it wasn't really the place for me, and so I was looking at schools around and more closer to home, and I found Troy. And I was looking through all the majors and all the classes that I could take, and I was like, well, what's pretty close to film? And I was like, graphic design, that sounds artsy, that sounds like maybe it would be close to some sort of film production or anything creative in general. And so I ended up looking at some of the classes, and I saw like motion graphics was a course, and just sort of like some more video introduction classes were in there. So I was like, well, maybe I'll just try graphic design. And I got here and I was terrible. Like, I did not know what I was doing. I really didn't have a creative mind. Some of my work just wasn't great for the first 2 years or so. And then I started kind of like my true graphic design courses in the spring. And those included motion graphics, typography, graphic design principles and practices, and that's when I met Professor Stagl, and he just kind of helped me along to be where I am now. But a lot of what kind of pushed me forward creatively and gave me the opportunity to step into a whole new light was video production and photography, which I learned from Professor Jacks. And those sort of kind of gave me the opportunity to not only win awards, but also create some work that is really personal to me and that I can share with everyone.
That's right. Thank you, Stu. Let's give him a hand. And not to maybe jump ahead and kind of, spoil the plot of this whole thing, but I think the very last thing that Stu said there is something that we talk about a lot. I know that I do, I know Will does. We hardly understand what Greg's talking about, but we talk about telling the story, right? And really just making sure that whatever story that you're telling, that it's personal in nature. And a lot of what we've learned about AI up to this point, I feel like technology-wise, is that it is very powerful. It can do a lot of things, right? But it can't be Stu, right? It can't have Stu's experiences. It doesn't know how Stu feels about taffy or popcorn, or it doesn't know Stu's, his interpersonal emotions. And so we try to get that out of students, just like you see back here in a lot of this work, right? I think a lot of the work, when I was hanging it up, and by the way, Stu helped, and as did Maddie Ashmore helped with hanging a lot of this. I think a lot of what I see here and a lot of the work that I see from my students, the good stuff anyway, is really personal, right? And that is what Stu ended up winning some awards for. So thanks for that backstory, Stu. And Stu's going to be an integral part when I start the actual presentation in a few hours about what the actual subject and content is going to be. We're going to be kind of going back and forth like a game show. All right, so a lot of people think that AI is relatively new. When did AI actually begin? Anybody know the exact date that AI actually began? Anyone? Okay. Well, here's when it began for me. It's when this movie came out in 1983. This is a movie called War Games. See, I grew up in the 80s when there was a lot of movies out there about things that we were supposed to be making believe that this was real. And this was all really about a game of tic-tac-toe that was unwinnable, right? It was like this man versus man, all right, computer versus computer dilemma. And it still holds up. Even if you're not a Ferris Bueller fan, this film really does still hold up. And you can go back and really kind of learn some things. And then this film came out 2 years later, a little film a lot less popular than War Games. It was called Daryl, right? And if you've never seen Daryl, that's their AI in Daryl. Daryl is the AI, right? And so these two films for me were it when I was a kid. I was just like, well, this is the future. Like, that's what AI is going to look like in 2024 or 2025 or whatever year this is, right? So that's what I think a lot of 80s kids thought. Like robots, flying cars, humanoids, right? Countries going to war because machines tell them to. And honestly, like, is there some of that? Well, I mean, we got Trump, but yeah, so there is some of it, but we don't really have all of what maybe we were kind of programmed to believe was going to happen back in the 80s. And these, I'll leave them up for just for reference. This stuff isn't even in the presentation, but, and then now here we are now, right? And so we've got a lot of things to talk about. We'll get into the presentation in a second, but I just want to show some content because I think that content's really interesting. So the name of the first feature-length film ever made fully by AI, anybody know what it's called? Huh?
Was it Titan?
This one here, it was called, its first feature-length animation that AI made. It was called Where the Robots Grow. And like, if you...
Welcome to Planet Oracle number 5.
If you watch it, if you check out the trailer, it's like you're watching a Disney or a Pixar film, right? Now, how many people in the room have seen WALL-E? There's something special about WALL-E, right? What is it? Is it the fact that he's a robot or the fact that he fell in love? What is it about WALL-E? It's that we're made to believe that WALL-E has a soul, really, right? It's Stu. It's that story, right? That's what it is. Stu and WALL-E are very similar in that way, right? So it's that story, and that's like if you go and you watch any Pixar film, how much artificial intelligence is being used in the creation of any of that work, in the creation of a feature length, in the creation of photography or film or anything, right? A lot of it isn't us. A lot of it is the software or the machines that are recording us. But it's the nuance, it's the story that really kind of propels that project forward. Stu's project that he was talking about before, that he has won some awards for, it's called what?
Isolation.
Isolation, and it's all about
Isolation.
being isolated, right? But it's that story, that yearning almost that you have to not be isolated. And you drew on experiences from that, from COVID.
Yeah, a little bit of COVID and just a little bit of personal.
A little bit of personal things going on, right? And again, so it's that story that we go back to that really kind of propels our projects forward. And even when Greg teaches, you know, and I give him a lot of crap for this, but he does say, you can use AI in my class, yeah. But you've got to be able to draw the line. You've got to put a line in the sand and say, where does it separate? Where does the AI stop? So Greg, I'll ask you this. When you teach, what class are you actively engaging students with AI in?
Conceptual drawing.
Conceptual drawing, interesting, because it's ideas, right? And so explain to us how you're using AI in the classroom.
It's usually individual discussions, and we're ideating and developing ideas, and I'll usually bring up AI as a way to, you know, and it could be in the drawing, you know, looking at the work, and we're discussing, you know, what works, what may need some changes, and I will interject the idea of using AI to help create ideas, maybe to help enhance the background, or to use AI to help with, you know, looking at different ways ways of posing a figure. Yeah, I've used it as not as the all-in tool to finish the piece, but as a way to help create ideas to help enhance it.
But then you draw the line in the sand and you say, when you pick up that pencil or that paintbrush, or when you sit down to make, that better be you, and you better be able to talk about your process and the steps that you went through, right? And so I think that's extremely important. We'll talk a little bit about that. Some other kind of content, really quick. The greatest AI commercial ever made. It's outrageous. Like, I don't know if anybody is, as the kids would say, peeped this before. But if you haven't peeped this, it's really, really over the top.
A tale is told of a star that fell in the days when men were hair-covered brutes roaming the earth. This shard of celestial steel was unlike anything early man had ever encountered. And from those 5 fortuitous stainless steel blades came the world's first smooth, silky shave. And it was in that moment manliness burst into existence. This blade charged forward through the ages of steel and dragon fire. Great conquerors slew tyrants. Founding fathers revolted. And as men's manes were tamed, so they tamed the wild frontier. Also, Steve used it to get a good shave. And he's a pretty solid guy. But as power often breeds enemies, so a wild-bearded philosopher...
So leave them wanting more. So you got it. You see where we're headed with that, right? Now, there is an approach there that's also being kind of sprinkled in, and that approach is, absurdity and humor. And we know somebody's writing that, right? The AI didn't make anyone laugh. That much I can guarantee you, right? So what I do is, as an advertiser or marketer, as a designer, I'm looking at what studio put this out, right? What advertising agency did they work with? Who has the copywriter that wrote it? Because I bet this didn't win any awards, unless it was for copywriting or what? Maybe use of AI. Which, isn't that odd? Like, use of AI? I see it all the time now. We get paraphernalia sent to us all the time. We want you to enter this competition, and there's always things called use of AI as a category, believe it or not. So, how creatively can you use AI? Well, I'll show you how creatively I can use AI. So I said to Stu, hey Stu, I want you to make me a presentation. And so Stu said, okay, I can do that. And he made this entire presentation. What's going on here?
That's what happens when you use AI.
So he made this entire presentation, not only with AI to generate the images, but also to write it for me, right? So we sat down and we developed a real loose framework. And I said, well, if I'm going to do a presentation on AI, what the hell, might as well use AI, right? So let's not only figure out what we want to talk about, but then also just have it deliver some examples for us. So Stu, what kind of prompt did you use for that right there?
My prompt was mainly just kind of like to start by introducing the idea of ethically using AI, was to just sort of type in artificial intelligence in Adobe Firefly. And
Adobe Firefly, by the way, quick plug for that. If you haven't used Adobe Firefly as an artificial intelligence tool, do so. A ton of control using Adobe Firefly. Sorry, keep going. Anything else?
Nah, that was about it.
Okay. All right, so next up, just a real quick overview of some of the topics that we're going to talk about, right? Avoiding plagiarism. Like, I couldn't sell my students the idea of avoiding plagiarism. One just failed thesis 2 days ago because they plagiarized their entire project. And plagiarism, cheating, use it interchangeably, however you want, but they literally did that. And so the next one is using AI as a tool, not as a replacement. And literally, you could have been in this room 2 years ago, and Nikhil's bullet points were almost identical to these. He's a little bit smarter than me, though. So his were a little bit more in depth. He's a little bit more of like a researcher, and he got down to the nitty-gritty of generating images and comparing them. Avoiding over-reliance. kind of some of the things we talked about, Greg, educating yourself and then setting boundaries. So avoiding plagiarism, I think that this is really like black and white if you're Dr. Kelly Swear, right? Because her students are turning in what? Research papers, right? So, I mean, that's black and white all day long. If you're using AI, ChatGPT, or any other, engine to generate a research paper, that's clear as day. Like, you can reverse search that and just know, or you can just look for the very common commas, the sentence structures, and any other, things that might stick out at you, like, oh wait, this student doesn't know 7-letter words, right? So anything like that that's really sticking out to you might really be a tell there. And for our students specifically in art and design, well, you know what, I'll turn this over to you, Jillian. Art and design, right? Photography, right? Somebody turns in something and you think they generated it, right? How are you approaching that? What do you do?
Well, I have all of my students that use something that's kind of like digitally, I can tell it's manipulated. I make them show me Photoshop and all of their layers. So show me your work.
Yeah.
And if they can't show me their work and they can't explain how they did it, then
that's right. Show the process. And I do the same thing. Like if I even sniff for 1 second any form of plagiarism, AI generated anything, I want to see it. And I'm telling you who's terrible at this, and I made the damn thing, right? The online students that we have. They really, truly think they can get away with it. And you know what? We just hold their feet to the fire just like we do in class. And so if we see any of that at all, we ask for the process. And 9 times out of 10, we're usually right? Avoiding plagiarism. Now, Stu, what is this image here? What is happening here, my man?
That's a great question. So I typed in as the prompt, avoiding plagiarism with artificial intelligence, and it resulted in what you see right there, which is a lot of objects on top of a book.
Yep.
And
this appears to be a lantern forming from written words.
yes.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's fantastic.
And
A lot of weird polygons going in different directions, kind of dead giveaways, right? What's the most popular, in my experience anyway, the most popular thing to 100% spot AI?
Count the fingers.
Hands, right? Never ever does it get hands right. Usually noses go in the wrong direction, the head's looking this way, the nose is going this way, right? So unless they're like a bare knuckle boxer, there's no need for that. A student or a professional, now that's an interesting concept. As a professional, what the heck does that mean as a professional? Well, we got a couple of new professionals in the room. How do you avoid plagiarism by using AI correctly as a professional, right? You have a conversation up front with your clients, and you say to them that there is an opportunity for us to potentially use artificial intelligence in this video or in this design or whatever it might be. Are you okay with me doing that, right? And a lot of times they might say, hey, if it saves me some money, it very well might be. But then also you need to think about like those sources, like where is it pulling the source material from, right? And that's really what these AI engines do. They're scouring the web, they're taking information that's already out there, and they're pulling from source material from someone else. So again, ethical? That's a tough word to use in any of this. Is it ethical for me to ask Stu to make the whole presentation? Probably not, right? But I gave him a framework to work around. I gave him some bullet points that I wanted to hit. And so we had a real healthy conversation up front that he was going to use AI to do this. And I have to expect, as Stu's client, to see this when he turns in that project. I can't be confused as a client to see things like that if I have one of my creative people telling me they're going to use AI. Because right now, on a prosumer level, it doesn't get too much better than that, right? Unless, and we'll take a look at the unless in a minute, but unless you're bringing your own content to the table. And we'll talk about that in just a sec. All right, so the next slide here is using AI as a tool. Look, I love what's going on here. Can I zoom? I can't zoom in there. I guess I'll do this. Look at all these tools I wish I had in my garage. What'd you type, Stu?
I actually typed artificial intelligence as tools, and it gave me nothing other than tools.
Nothing other than tools.
So,
What's this tool? That looks like something Will would use in Mississippi. That's what that is. Some tool for knocking people in the knee or something.
Really good joke, Chris.
Yeah. But I mean, we don't know. Like, what's that? That's a floating tool without a handle, right? So, that floating tool without a handle. Me in middle school, right? So it's like that idea. Like, if you're going to develop a prompt, you better go deep to the next level and really spend some time sitting down, writing, and thinking. And I knew that Stu was going to make the whole thing in an hour and a half, right? Because honestly, that's what Stu does, right? Especially if it's not something Stu is, no, it's not a bad thing. It was for me. I would expect that, right? For his own project, much more time, a couple hours. But for me, an hour, put the presentation together. I knew it'd be quick. I knew there'd be errors. But again, sitting down to write it, to really develop a crystal clear prompt so that you have none of this kind of stuff happening, will tell you, it'd be quicker to just go shoot it. You could go in Will's garage and shoot that right now because it's got all the tools lined up. Set up a light, get the dolly out, and move it around, right? So again, using AI as a tool, don't let AI define your vision. And that comes to the also that I'm going to show you in just a minute. At the end of this, you guys are all going to think that I'm paid by Adobe for what I'm going to show you, because of what I'm going to show you, because it's really super cool. Obviously, Stu, some more AI-generated things there. Avoiding over-reliance. Greg, do you have that conversation with your students when you tell them to use AI or encourage them to?
Yeah, I mean, we talk about it as a tool.
Yeah.
Computer's a tool, camera's a tool, your pencil, but we just talk about it as a tool. It's not it's like the computer doesn't think for you.
Right.
And it should never think for you, and AI should not be also thinking for you as well.
So avoiding over-reliance for us is obviously as a support and not a mechanism to create, right? If you have to start with AI, that's a problem, right? If that, at least, again, this is my opinion. I'm looking at the camera. This is just my words. But I feel like if you're starting with AI, just stop and pick up a pencil and pick up your sketchbook and really generate some ideas. And we tell our students this, like he knows, like even in a basic class like typography, I would never say, go get to work, open up Photoshop or InDesign or Illustrator. No, sit down with a pencil. He can't draw or anything, me either, right? And I don't want to sit down with a pencil, but we force ourselves to because it makes our work better, right? If Will, if you're going to set up a room to light, right, you're going to diagram that out on the board, and you're going to agree where the lights are going to be in your actor or your whoever it is that you're shooting there, right? Diagram it first, write it down. The whole thing about writing a developed prompt, well, you're going to spend just as much time writing that prompt as you could put down a storyboard and go shoot the thing. Because, and I'll come back to this in a minute, because we know based on the images that you created, AI is not perfect. And I'm going to show you something where I did 263 iterations of something to get to perfect. And it wasn't perfect, right? And so we'll take a look at some of that in just a second here. I went all the way out. We're going to do this again. Come back down. All right. Next thing is going to be educating yourself. And guys, I'm not joking. I'm not kidding with you when I say 2 years ago I didn't believe in it. I didn't want anything to do with it. It was like it was that quintessential, comical bird with his head in the sand routine. I didn't want to hear anything about it. I only went to Nikhil's presentation because I invited him to present. and I felt like, well, it's going to be rude if I don't go to it. That's the only reason why Scott's there now, right? So the reality is I really did believe it was a fad. I don't anymore. I think it's here to stay. I hope it doesn't all turn into that weird movie with Tom Hanks with the train, Polar Express. I hope like all AI doesn't end up looking like that crazy commercial we just saw. I hope it gets better because of human interaction, right? I hope for those through lines. Are we there yet? We're not. We're just not. And we're probably years away from it being fluid, right? If not decades, because right now the technology can't keep up with what we want AI to be. And also, frankly, it's a little scary, right? Like, I'm an older guy and I think about, could AI potentially replace my job? Like, we've had this conversation. Like, could AI potentially replace my job in 5 years? Probably, right? I don't know unless I bring my personality, and Scott's saying no, unless I bring something else to the room, my experiences, my stories, Stu telling us about isolation being personal. If you're not bringing that to the classroom as an educator, if you're not bringing that to your clients as a designer, you're doing them and yourself an injustice, right? So keep that in mind. Educating yourself on the topic is really nothing too much more than staying up to date on the articles, right? Watching the video. I'm about to show you guys the video. I guarantee you're going to be like, what the hell did I just see? Because it's really kind of incredible how far we've been able to get in this short time. How long have we really been talking about this? 2 years? Maybe 2.5? Like, how long has it really been on our minds? Can you go back and pinpoint it and say it was maybe a couple years ago, right? It had to be post-COVID. Because the only thing we were talking about during COVID was COVID, right? So it had to just be in the last couple of years that it really seeped in. Be open to change, be open to adaptation. Again, I had to be open to all this, and then I got asked to do a project with it, and that's the 263 iterations that I had to do to get to an unfinished product, right? So, and then we got, and before I go on, I went, and Greg was there a couple years back. We went to an accreditation conference, and in that accreditation conference, there was a lot of open dialogue. Actually, that was 3 years ago. Last year, I went to another one. And AI was even more of a talking point. It was even more of a conversation, and they're not down on it. The accreditors aren't dumb, and they're not down on it. They're looking to how we're embracing it. They want you to document what you're doing in the classroom. They want to see the art shows that are being put on by people potentially using AI, right? They want to identify the good ways that it is, serving as a catalyst for change, whether it's in your classroom or within your art and design. So keep that in mind. Nobody is poo-pooing AI from the democratic level of being college accreditors. That much I know, because I've been to the last 2 NASAD meetings, and they're fine with it, right? So consider that. National Arts, Art and Design. I don't know what the S stands for. National Accreditation for Schools of Art and Design. And Design. Let's go with that, yeah. So, setting boundaries, kind of like what I asked Greg, like, I'll ask what you typed in a second. But,
Wait, that's on the wrong.
there you go. So, like, where do you draw the line in the sand? Where do you tell your students to stop? But we do that same thing in design too, right? Yeah. Even in art, we do the same thing. We say at some point, you just have to draw the line in the sand and say, enough's enough with the technology. He does it all the time, and it pisses me off at thesis, because he always is just like, I want to see your process over and over and over again. And I do too, but he obsesses about process, right? And that's good, because that's him drawing the line in the sand and saying, Stu, your film's great, but where are your photos? Where's your script? Where's your story? Where did all this come from? Did AI actually create your film for you? Did it?
No.
Okay, good. All right. So again, just kind of setting those boundaries, but then also staying consistent. And that's another thing. We talked about that document that we formulated about how to properly use AI in an art and design classroom. Very, very clear in there, every faculty member is going to handle it differently. So please make sure, like as a faculty member, you're handling it one way in class X, that you're very clear about how you're handling it in class Y, because it could be two completely different things. He's going to handle it one way in concept when he teaches that, but when he teaches thesis or maybe even an earlier class, he's going to probably say in like a 1,000 level class, no way in hell are you using AI, because we really have to, I hate to use this phrase, but weed out students that can't think for themselves, right? Even if you're a bad designer or a bad artist, at least we know it's your bad work, right? And there's something, as silly as that may sound, there's something to that. There's something to really knowing, okay, without the computer, without the technology, that person can't create. But at least I know that, so now I can figure out what they're actually really good at, right? So we can kind of peel those layers away. Okay, so before we do the thank you and everyone claps and stands and throws, right, whatever happens, I don't know. Let's talk about this. So this is called, we've been hearing the word generative a lot, right? What does the word generative mean when it comes to AI? Do you know about Photoshop's AI generative skills or tools? So what does generative mean?
To create.
To generate, to create, right? Right. But in Photoshop, you can just go in and you can be like, a snake eating a baby. And boom, it'll give you 3 versions of a snake eating a baby, right? And by the way, there are things that won't do, because I've asked. So yeah, I was wondering like how far you could take stuff. Adobe's got some restrictions on there. So just keep that in mind.
Is this part of the presentation?
But what, you don't want it to be. But what it doesn't do is it'll never limit your work being extended upon, right? And so now what I'm going to show you is, this is called a generative extend tool. So to give you an idea of what that means, is Jared could be, Jared, Studio 207, thank you. And Rihanna too, all right? So if I walk from here to here, right, and I turn in that video clip, and you say, no, you were told to walk all the way over to Craig, who's not paying attention, and knock the phone out of his hand, right? But you stop right here, and that's all you've got, right? So it can fix that. That's kind of crazy, right? But you have to ask yourself as an educator or as a maker, is that okay? How far do we take it, right? So here now is Adobe's AI generative extension tool. The first couple seconds, and it'll tell you right down here, original footage. And I'm just gonna squat down so you guys can see this. Oh, I may need help getting
A
back
little bit
up.
further, your head, your giant noggin is in this.
Original footage, and generated footage.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. It'll extend, I think it's 2 to 3 seconds on either end of a video clip. So if I take this and I throw it, but it doesn't have it, right, going all the way, it got cut off, something happened, the battery died, you can extend it and it'll put it in.
That's in the new update, right?
That's in the new update. So, sorry, I'm gonna throw this across the room. But it's a really interesting thing because Stuart and I sat down and we said, well, how can we introduce video into this presentation? And so I really asked a lot of him. He didn't do it. It's okay. But I said, let's make this as unethical as possible. I said, I want you to remake your thesis film shot for shot using AI by typing in prompts. And you tried.
I did try.
We're not going to show it, right?
I want to see that.
I want to see that.
I'll give you Stuart's email later. So if you want to see it, maybe he can send you some. But he did, and just as narratively, how were the results?
They're not good.
They're not good. Yeah.
Yeah.
AI is generative from scratch video production. It's really, really, truly not there yet, right? Will it get there? Absolutely. 25, 30 years ago, was I still putting CD-ROMs inside of a computer? Yeah. When's the last time you bought a computer with a CD-ROM tray? Right? Yeah. So the idea is that the technology is going to advance very, very quickly, and it's going to get to a place where we're all like blown away by what it can do, but it's just not there yet. And personally, I'm kind of hoping it doesn't get there too quick. I figured at my age, I got about 15 good years left, and then I'll be ready to retire. But so if the AI doesn't take my job too soon, I'd be perfectly, I call it the AI. That made me sound really old,
You can get
right?
generative fill and it can stretch that another 3 or 4 years.
That's perfect. The damn SIP wins again. All right, so here we go. 263 iterations later, I was asked to create a Trojan for Troy's marketing department for their most recent Janice Hawkins magazine or whatever. I don't know what it's called, right? Yeah. Now, this is not where I started, right? I started many, many, many iterations ago. And on top of that, this then went into Photoshop, and Mark Mosley and I spent many sessions going back and forth, getting it to this point, right? 263 versions of this. 3 weeks, 3.5 weeks of work, okay? They scrapped the whole thing. They didn't use any of it. So, they did use some AI thing, but I don't actually have I didn't want to show that because, well, we can talk about that later. But they did end up using something else. But it was it became very, very clear around iteration 150 that they didn't know what they wanted, right? Like many clients. And they just knew they wanted a really cool AI generated Trojan that was going to startle people when they saw the cover of the magazine that said, that was really about you, right, Scott? Did you ever see it?
I think I saw it.
Yeah.
Was it about me, really?
I think there was maybe a headshot or a story about you in there. But it was truly about AI and how we were leveraging it on campus for our new AI Forward initiative. They actually did a story about the thesis student that made the hoodies. Yeah, the project wasn't great. But again, it was a solid attempt at using AI. This got personally modified many, many, many times over. I don't necessarily know that work that the student presented went through a lot of modifications. But again, that's what we talk about. Either start with your own work or end with your own work, but don't let the machines do it all for you, right? So, what do you think? Do you want to say anything else? I think we're up against it with time.
Yeah, you pretty much covered it.
Yeah. So, oh yeah, I did want to go back to this and ask Stuart right here. What did you type in there?
Funny enough, the exact opposite of what you see there. I, after creating the past slides and everything, a lot of them had text on the ones that I generated that looked very similar to that, and I went through several iterations with that. I was like, no text, no robot, no whatever, and yet it still generated that.
That's right.
Without fail. So
my last thing here is I really do want to help Stu for helping me put all this together. I want to invite all of you guys to come out on the 15th of May to our thesis showcase. It's going to be in the room right over here. Professor Jacks is currently helping the students get it installed. That's what you're kind of seeing with all the walls being moved around right now. I know you two had a conversation earlier with Katie, who's doing a meat locker, right? A very exciting project that we're interested in showcasing. So please, if you're around Troy or in the area, come out on the 15th and check all that out. And thank you for your time this evening.
Good job, students.
We bring the logo back.
That won't be long.
Okay. All right. And or something. There it goes.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So, although you might not be able to see it back there, I have a little pin here that says Undergraduate Research Week. And so, we intentionally, we been partnering with UAB. This is the second year we've done it. And we intentionally scheduled this during Undergraduate Research Week so we could showcase the work of many of our undergraduates. And so, for example, Aeneas, who ran away, so I wouldn't point to her again, and Maddie, they presented Monday. They gave papers to Undergraduate Research Week, and they also will be presenting tomorrow. As Stuart, we got to see his work today. So I want to, and then in addition to that, we have a lot of work. I think maybe most of the work we have here, the artwork we have back here, is from our undergraduates here at UAB and at Troy. So I just want to give a round of applause to the undergraduates who are participating.
And Scott, how long is this going to be up? Remind us. And then where does it go after that?
Where does it go after that?
Yeah. Does it go into
Do I
your
know the answer?
No.
Oh, it's not.
Oh.
Sorry, never mind. Scratch that.
Back to any of the stuff that you didn't print out is going back to the kids.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so regarding the art, what I do know the answer to is it's back there. If you haven't had a chance to look at this fabulous work, please do. This, now just so you know, this conference will be running tomorrow as well, and the art will be here tomorrow, but from the morning until probably around noon or 1, there'll be a formal dinner occurring out here in the lobby, so it might be a little complicated to get in here in the morning. So
Come around the back.
You can get, yeah.
you get it around the backside? Okay,
Yeah.
yeah. And then, of course, they'll all be gone, I think, by afternoon. But I do really want to encourage you to see what they're doing. Also, on the schedules, you may notice there's a QR code. This QR code is to evaluate this for the Alabama Humanities Alliance that is funding this. So, if you want to see things like this funded, do that and, tell us what you think in a positive way. And if you have only negative things to say, this QR code actually will put a virus on your phone. Don't ever look at that, it's bad. And then one last thing before, and then of course tomorrow, we have, tomorrow we'll have this up, should be here all day, or until Chris locks the door.
Well, so the building launch tomorrow at 6:30.
Okay, so we have it on here until 7. It won't be till 7, so maybe
Well,
6.
we can change it to 7. That's
You
fine.
don't have to say it. You
We
don't have to
just
say it.
have to make sure somebody comes over and closes the door.
And then tomorrow at 10 a.m. we begin presentations that will be over in Howell Hall. For those visitors, we say Howell Hall in here because everybody who's local, whether from the community here or Troy, knows what Howell Hall, and they don't know Hawkins Adams Long Hall of Honor, which is what that is, and it's just over that way. And so that is where that will be tomorrow, and I do want to encourage everyone to come to those as well. And here are some of our many presentations. And kicking us off tomorrow will be Daniel Amrine, who is he does something for the center. What is it? The something puppetry center? What do you-
Yeah, I work at the Center for Puppetry Arts.
Center for Puppetry Arts. Although you're not talking about puppetry,
I'm not talking about
to
puppetry. no.
my great disappointment.
Maybe next time.
But he is talking about something else cool. I forgot what
Talking
it's
about superheroes.
Superhero, okay, superhero comics, yeah, and many other fine things. So please stay, look at these, and also those guests here, check out the art downstairs. We don't have an exhibition right now on this side, but we do still have the Knoll exhibition up.
Yeah.
Am I wrong about that?
That's true.
Yeah, and then
But downstairs is a whole interactive
Yeah.
display of East meets West.
yes, and please do enjoy our beautiful campus. Anyway, thank you all for coming.
Thank you,
We appreciate
Scott.
that.